Hey, welcome to the show. About a month or so ago, I got a chance to speak with an infectious disease expert about this COVID-19 global pandemic that we've all been living through. And things have changed a little bit since we did this interview, but there's so much information that is still relevant and pertinent. So I want you to pay attention and listen and take it all in and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Because we're in the middle of a global pandemic, I thought that it would be really good to speak to an infectious disease expert. So I decided to call my friend Dr. Todd Price. He's been practicing in this area of medicine for over 30 years. He completed his residency in UCLA, and then of course he came to Texas in order to complete his infectious disease fellowship. So he's a person that has a lot of knowledge about what's going on right now, and we want to ask him all the pertinent questions that will help us to be safe and how to navigate this current situation. He's going to help us separate fact from fiction. So let's get to it. Let's welcome Dr. Todd Price. Welcome to the show, Dr. Price.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask you, there's so much going on right now, and we don't really know what's accurate information and what's inaccurate information. So I think the first question that I want to ask you is, what is the difference between SARS, COVID-19, and coronavirus? Because we're hearing all those different terms.
So coronavirus, there's a bunch of them. There's probably four coronaviruses that actually probably most of us have been exposed to and have dealt with. So there's four of them that cause about 1/3 of the colds that we have here in the United States. Then SARS appeared in the early 2003. That was in southern China near Hong Kong and around a town called Guangzhou. It used to be called Canton. And that was a pulmonary syndrome that was actually more infectious than the current outbreak. And but it was not as widespread. And there was 2 to 3 waves of that particular disease, meaning that there was a couple of seasons where they had problems. But it did not take off in the United States like it did in China, and also there was an outbreak in Canada and other places. And then there was MERS, that's Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and that's mostly in the Middle East. It's not as infectious. There seems to be localized areas of outbreaks, like mostly in families. And it's thought all of these are thought to start from a definitive host of a bat. In Middle East, it's the camel, that's the intermediate host. And SARS, back in the early 2000s, was through the palm civet, which is kind of like a little animal, kind of like a little raccoon. And so now we have this one. And it's similar to the SARS coronavirus with some differences. So, and this is infectious, maybe not as infectious as the SARS, but it's now pandemic. So that's where the problem arises. And the problem also is because this is a new pathogen, a new virus to us, the host, and therefore we don't have previous experience, therefore we don't have immunity to it. But as all of us develop immunity, and we are developing immunity, those who are exposed to it, then once a certain percentage of the population gets immunity, it's called herd immunity, then it will go away.
Wow. Okay, so we're praying that happens really quickly, of course. Yes. Let me ask you this. So what are the symptoms? Because I'm hearing a varied list of things that people have, certain symptoms, and then I'm hearing about a lot of people that didn't have any symptoms at all, and they still contacted this latest strand of the coronavirus. So what are you seeing as a medical professional?
Yes, but it's thought that most of the people who are exposed to it have very few symptoms, or maybe even be asymptomatic. Or it'd be very mild symptoms, maybe headaches, cold, like cold symptoms, maybe a little fever, a little headache, sore throat. Sometimes they say loss of taste, loss of smell. So for the most part, and mild pulmonary symptoms, mild cough. And then there is a small percentage of people who get really sick. Probably of 100% of the people, probably 80% will do very well. They either be asymptomatic or have mild symptoms. 20% will get sick enough to go see a doctor, and then probably half of them will have to go to the hospital. And of those who go to the hospital, of those that get disease, maybe a 1% will not do well, meaning that they will not survive. So it may be a little bit more than that, maybe a little bit less than that. For comparison, influenza is thought to be like a 0.1% mortality rate, whereas now this current epidemic, it's somewhere between 1 and 2% mortality. It'll
Okay.
probably be less as more people get exposed and more people get tested.
Okay, so since you're talking about getting tested, that's something that's really come up. We've seen a lot of famous people, athletes, actors, and actresses, and they were able to get tested, even though some of them didn't have any symptoms. What about just the average person here in our city and in other cities across the nation? I mean, what symptoms do you have to have in order to get the test?
If you have fever and pulmonary symptoms, or any combination of it, so shortness of breath, cough, fever, then they'll test you.
Okay. And so who do you go to get a test? I've seen like the mobile sites, but is that the only place that you can go to get a test?
Well, here in Houston, you can call 211 and then go to option 6, and the city of Houston will direct you where the testing sites are. But most hospitals, they say if you're really sick, you're having fevers, or developing progressive shortness of breath, then the best place to go is not to an independent testing site, but go to the emergency department somewhere in one of the hospitals.
Okay, that's good. So let me ask you, how close do you think we are to finding a vaccine? I heard about the drug, it's called chloroquine, something like that, that they've been entertaining, some drug. I don't know if that's the one that they've used to treat malaria and other diseases. Where are we in the grand scheme of getting closer to finding a vaccine that works?
Okay, so we're talking about two different things. One's medications, and one's a vaccine.
Yes.
So they're a little bit different. So the medicine you're talking about is hydroxychloroquine. They also called Plaquenil in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And they use that for lupus and arthritis, and they have used it in the past for malaria. They don't use it for malaria anymore because malaria has developed resistance. In most cases, in some locations in the world, they can still use that medication. So, and they've used it in combination with Zithromax, which is a common antibiotic. And the theory about that is that back in 1917, that was before I was around, but they had a big epidemic of the flu. And then in 1918, they had a second wave. And the second wave, there's many, many people who died. 50 to 100 million people died worldwide. But the cause of death was mostly bacterial pneumonia. Now, that was before antibiotics came to the scene. So it's thought that an antibiotic with a viral illness is probably a good idea. So they did studies initially in China, very limited studies, then a bigger study, which is not very big, in France. They may be 30 people. 30 people took the drug, the combination of drugs, and 30 people did not. And those who took the drug did far better than those who did not take the drug. So in my experience here, we've had maybe 40, 50 patients total that it seems to work. So when you take the hydroxychloroquine and the Zithromax, within 24 hours, for the most part, your temperature is either gone or it is improved. And then the pulmonary symptoms will take a little bit longer, 2 to 3 days. And you can see every day, you can see the chest x-rays. Now, when you do chest x-rays, they kind of lag behind the actual improvement. And so, but within 3 days, the chest x-ray shows some stabilization or improvement. So that's hydroxychloroquine and the Zithromax. It's usually a 5-day course, although sometimes you do a longer period of time. There's also another medicine called remdesivir. They initially made that for Ebola. And this, unfortunately, is a study drug for sure. So the hydroxychloroquine is available for doctors to prescribe. It can be it's what they call off-label I mean, it's not labeled for use, although the FDA has come around and said, yeah, you can use it. So where remdesivir is a study drug, and we have to get that from the manufacturer, which is Gilead, and have to employ or enroll the patient in the study. Then there's also convalescent plasma. So those people who have had disease and they develop antibodies, they take their plasma and they give it to patients. It's kind of like immunoglobulin. And then because part of the process of this particular disease is an autoimmune problem, which is why hydroxychloroquine helps, because it also is an immune suppressant. There's another drug, an IL-6 or interleukin-6 inhibitor that they're studying also. Then so those are the drugs. There's a few other drugs they're looking at, but probably too premature for me to talk about. And then there is two other things. That is monoclonal antibodies. That means they're working on an antibody that will attach to the virus, which will make it either ineffective or inability to attach to our cells. In some way, it blunts its effect. And then there's a vaccine. So those two are going to take a little bit longer to come into play. So it may be 6 months, but more likely a year. So if there is a second wave, and I'm not saying there will be, but they're postulating that there may be, then the vaccines and the monoclonal antibodies will be very effective and will probably prevent a lot of illness. But for now, as we're using these drugs, they're studying the drugs, and we're going to see which drugs works the best. Is there an option to take the drug to prevent the disease, like hydroxychloroquine? But with every drug, there's potential side effects, so we have to kind of take that in consideration. So right now, I think if you ask most infectious disease physicians, they will say that hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax are working for the most part.
Okay.
That's a long answer.
No, but I love it because, I want people to understand exactly what's available, where we are in the process. And, there's so much that can be spread around. I want them to get accurate information, which is why you are here. So I want to thank you for that. Now I want to pivot and ask you more about this whole social distancing and masks and all the things that we can be doing to stay safe. I got to be honest. I've never seen my neighbors so much. I mean, everybody's out riding bikes. I'm seeing whole families out walking every day. Is it safe to be out in our neighborhoods right now?
Okay, so it's thought that this is transmitted by air droplets. So in the hospital, there's essentially three isolation categories. One is contact. So say someone has typhoid, salmonella, and so you want to touch them. So that's a contact isolation. And the same thing with MRSA, contact. Then there's airborne. That's like tuberculosis or measles, where there's very, very small particles. So if you go into the room where a patient has tuberculosis or measles, then just being in the room, you're at risk. And then finally, there's air droplet. Now, the coronavirus and influenza are thought to be air droplets. So when you cough or sneeze, the virus is on these small particles of moisture that kind of hang in the air for a little bit, maybe for a few minutes to a few hours. And it's thought that these air droplets, with a normal sneeze or normal cough, not exaggerated, they will only go for 6 feet at the most. Now, when it gets hotter, when the temperature is warmer, and therefore there's more humidity in the air, then these air droplets get blocked by the moisture that's already there. And so they will not go 6 feet. So it maybe go 4 feet, maybe 2 feet, maybe just 1 feet. It depends on how hot, how much moisture is in the air. So you hear about 6 feet. The 6 feet is because it's thought that this is transmitted by air droplets, and that the longest distance that you can be exposed to someone is 6 feet. So that's the social distancing, 6 feet.
I heard someone talking about 27 feet. Where's that come from?
Yeah, that was a study out of, some university. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the study, that was an exaggerated cough or exaggerated sneeze where, And so it is not thought that that is too reliable. So, but I'm not trying to diss that either. But for the most part, it's 6 feet. And if it is 26 feet or 27 feet or 30 feet, the amount of virus particles that are going to get to you is going to be smaller. And any disease, most diseases, you need to be exposed to a whole lot of pathogens for you to get sick. So, so that's the social distancing. So now in our projects in Africa, we've been telling people that the health is in your hands. That means two things. Number one, it's up to you to do what is all you can do to prevent infection. And the other thing is wash your hands. So there's more things than coronavirus that is transmitted by handshakes or by hands. So the worst thing that you can do is touch everything and shake someone else's hand and then rub your face,
I
because
have to admit, I've noticed you don't really shake hands often. I don't think you've ever shaken my
yeah,
hand.
it's disgusting. Okay, it's not disgusting, but it's an infection risk. That was a Middle Ages thing to make sure that you didn't have a sword and that you run person through. That was a Middle Ages thing. Okay, now the sword would be easy. We see the sword, we just don't see these small little things that can kill you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've never been a big shaking hand, just because I'm around infections a lot. So I don't. So people should not shake hands
It's official.
or touch thing that someone else's hand has touched. So wash hands, do not shake hands, and then the final thing you alluded to was the mask.
Yeah.
So okay, initially there was a little controversy about the mask. So initially, people were buying masks and to prevent themselves from getting sick. Well, that's never been proven to work unless you're in a confined space. Say a healthcare worker goes into a hospital room where a patient is either on a ventilator or they had some sort of procedure like a bronchoscopy where there's a lot of these air droplets in the air. Then the N95 mask is the best way of preventing those air droplets or anything that's even airborne, not just air droplet, to enter into your mouth or your nose. And therefore that decreases disease. But as casual, it's not been proven just to wear a mask will prevent that. But when a patient is admitted to the hospital, we tell them to put a mask on. And the reason is if they're coughing and sneezing, we want to stay in the mask. We don't want to go to 6 feet. And that decreases exposure to other people. So now the CDC, I guess other people are advising that everyone, if you're going to be around people, especially if you're within 6 feet of them, then you should wear a mask. So say you go into a grocery store or you're going to be where other people are and now, then probably be good for you to wear a mask because there are some evidence that there's asymptomatic spread. So the mask is to protect the mask wearer from infecting other people, not preventing that person who wears a mask to get the disease. Okay. The other thing it does, though, is it sort of prevents you from putting your hands into your mouth or face. So, so that's what the mask is for. And that's why it was controversial.
Now, what's the difference between just a regular mask that we can purchase? You know, when I went to Australia at the beginning of the year, my husband bought a huge basket, a box of masks for me. But they were, you know, the blue, light blue colored ones that you kind of fan out and put on. What's the difference between those masks and this N95 mask that you're mentioning?
They call it N95 respirator. And they need to be fitted, actually. So like in order for me to be able to see patients in the hospital, they fitted me there's different manufacturers. And so they fitted me for different ones and which ones I can wear, which one fits me. And so they're very snug to your face. There's really no air that is able to get in. You are breathing through the mask. You're not breathing around the mask. Whereas the surgical mask or the normal mask that you have, whether it's a mask or just a cloth or a bandana, you're going to breathe around the mask in some instances. So some of the pathogens in that situation, if you're close contact, it will come around. It's not totally protective, whereas the N95 is, for the most part, if you're fitted, it's totally protective.
Got it. Okay. I always wondered what the difference was. And of course, I have two boys. My oldest son, Evan, he's a really big boy. And my youngest son, Aaron, is 13, so he's getting bigger. But we were having this discussion about the earlier reports that children couldn't really be harmed by the virus. They could only be carriers. And that maybe just the older population, like over 60 or over 70, were at higher risk. I mean, where are we now with our understanding about how young people and older people and people in between are affected?
Yeah, so it's thought that those who are over 60 years old, especially those over 80 years old, are more susceptible to this infection.
Mm-hmm.
And especially those who have pre-existing illness, such as diabetes, obesity, those who smoke are at higher risk. Those who have previous cardiovascular disease, and those who have chronic lung problems. Smoking, there's a receptor that the virus attaches to in the nasopharyngeal cells. And when you're a smoker, it can attach easier. Plus, when you smoke, there's these hair cells in your bronchi that constantly move mucus out. But when you smoke, your smoking paralyzes those hair cells. So there's many reasons not to smoke, and those are a couple of reasons.
Wow.
Whereas younger people are less susceptible to this infection. So I'm not saying that they cannot. I've had patients that were in their 40s and have had some very difficult times. But for the most part, the younger people and children are not likely to become symptomatic with this particular infection.
Okay. Well, we're still keeping the boys inside just as a precaution. It's interesting. This whole situation has been it's been different. I mean, I personally have never lived through anything like this before. I called my mom and asked her when's the last time she ever had to be quarantined for anything. She said, well, I remember World War II, and she said, except that night it was even worse. They had the blackouts and etc. So we haven't really had to go that far. Whenever a country goes to war, someone, makes the declaration that the war has ended. And so as it relates to the war on this pandemic, who makes that determination when all of this is over and we're able to go back to, our jobs and frequent the restaurants again? And what are they looking for to make that determination?
They're looking, okay, so there's been some good news in New York today, in that there's been less patients who required hospitalization. They've also, they estimated at this point in the disease process, they had previously estimated that there'd be 50,000 beds in New York taken up by COVID patients. But in fact, it's more like 13 to 15%. 50,000 was predicted. Now it's like 13 or 15,000. So there's still a lot of patients with COVID, but much less than what they expected. So they look at the new infections is what they're looking at. They look at the deaths, but to determine what the curve is going to be, they're looking at new infections. And so that, I'm just a treating physician. I just see the patients. My job is to treat the patients when they come into the hospital. And we're very successful for the most part. My job is not to predict when it's going to be over, but everyone asks me. So I guess the people who determine that is Dr. Fossey and Dr. All the healthcare officials at the government level. And it's different, obviously Italy, there's good news out of Italy, it's going down, as well as Spain. So each country has their officials that are looking at the data. They talk about these models, and for the most part, they kind of overestimate. It's better to overestimate than underestimate, because if you overestimate, you get prepared for the worst, but it's usually not going to be the worst. So, like for instance, you go have a surgery, and there's a consent form. There's always going to be a thing that says, yeah, you could die. But that's the worst case scenario. How often does that happen? Not very often. And that's the way they're doing. That's the way this is happening. They're estimating the worst, so we can be prepared for the worst.
Mm.
We're hoping for not the worst, and in fact, it's going to be much less than the worst. That's my experience. So there's good news out of New York, and looks like the curve may be improving. We'll just have to see over the next week or so and see what happens. But I would think that within the next 4 weeks, most of the bad stuff will be over with.
Yeah.
And most locations in the United States. Actually, in Washington State, they've gone through the worst, and they've actually given back some of their ventilators that were given to them because they don't anticipate needing them. So they give them back to the federal government, so the federal government can send them somewhere else, like New York or Michigan or somewhere else.
Well, that's good news. That's really good news, because I've been hearing a lot about this ventilator, shortage everywhere. So hopefully things are going better, going in the right direction. Let me ask you this. You're a healthcare, physician, and the nurses and doctors and anesthesiologists, all of you are on the front lines, and you put your life at risk. I've heard of different physicians contracting this disease and dying. So let me ask you this. What do you do to protect yourself and to not take it home and spread it to your family, and is that what everyone else should be doing in your profession?
Yeah, so if you just, well, first of all, the hospital where I work, there's no visitors except for extreme circumstances. Like if you're going in and have a baby, then your husband can come in with you. That's it. Or if you're a child and you need to be hospitalized, then one of your parents can be there. Otherwise, there's no visitors. Visitors kind of bring stuff in. That's always sort of been a problem. So no visitors. Every healthcare worker that goes to the hospital is checked every day. So you can't get in the hospital if you don't pass the checks. So that's two things. Then when a patient is thought to have COVID, they put them in an isolation room, and sometimes, depending upon the situation, they'll put them in a negative pressure room, which means that if you open the door, the airflow goes in and then goes out through a HEP filter, and meaning that the filter is trapping all the virus, and so it's not going into the environment. And and then when a healthcare provider goes into those rooms, there's procedures. So you cover your hair, cover your head, cover your hair, cover your face either with goggles or with a shield, and wear a mask. And in cases where there's a ventilator where there might be more particles in the air, then you wear an N95 mask in addition to another just surgical mask. You wear gowns and wear gloves, and those are worn while you're in the room. And as you leave the room, there's either at the edge of the room or there's a sort of anti-room just outside the door where you dispose of those things, and then you wash your hands. Despite that, when healthcare workers go home, it's probably a good idea before they go into the house that they discard their clothing that they're wearing to work. Put them in a hamper or something so they can be washed, and then take a shower. So that's the best thing to do, I think.
Okay. I just want to help people be informed, but I also want to help inspire people. I'm a worship leader, and I'm a woman of faith, and you're a man of faith. So I wanted to ask you, how does your faith help you see things like this? Does it give you hope, even though simultaneously as a physician, you have to brace yourself for the worst? Like, how does your faith help you?
Well, devil's goal is to kill us all. So, enemy uses different means to do that. So, one is to kill our spirit, and one is to kill our bodies.
Yeah.
And so this virus is one of those things that try to kill our bodies at the same time killing our spirit. Mm-hmm. So, but God puts a hedge of protection around us. It's very clear in the Bible that that's the case. And it's very clear in my experience with infections. I mean, well, really, with every breath, you take in pathogens. You take in viruses and bacteria that should kill you. But God put in you, not only does he put a hedge around you, but he put in you an immune system that's going to respond to anything that's foreign that comes your way. So your immune system, when you're a baby, is very immature. And but as you grow and have experience with things, there's a reaction. So Newton said, for every action, there's a reaction. He's the guy back in the 1600s about the gravity. He came with the gravity theory, whatever. But for every action, there's a reaction. So the same thing with us. So God put in us an immune system for with every action, everything that comes against us, then we will develop a reaction. And that is why you have an immune system. So the virus is going to get weaker, and the humans, their immunity, the herd immunity, is going to get stronger. And that's how it is in most situations. Now, the only reason the virus will get stronger is if the host is not, the primary host is not us. But in this situation, the primary host is us. So, so there's an example of that. So they were, many years ago, in Australia, they had a rabbit problem. There's no natural predators of a rabbit in Australia. And so it's just a difficult problem. So they were having hunters hunt them, but that still wasn't taking care of the problem. So what they did is they came up with a virus that would kill the rabbits. That happened. They were happy. The first few months, it was killing all the rabbits. But then 6 months or 8 months later, the rabbits weren't dying. And they thought, well, maybe the virus was not infecting the rabbits, but they were. They found that the virus was in the rabbits. It's just that the virus got weaker and the rabbit's immune system got stronger. So that's what God put in us. For every action, there is a reaction. Plus, there's a hedge that's around us that God prevents things from. The devil does not have free reign.
Yeah, he's on a
The
leash.
devil is limited.
Yes.
But God is not limited.
Yes, I agree. I concur with everything you just said. I believe the same thing. The human body is so remarkable. The way that God created it, to be able to adjust to these different scenarios in life. I mean, it's just, I don't see how anyone can't believe in a God when you just look at how magnificent the human body is. So I just want to say thank you, Dr. Price. I mean, the information is so detailed and exactly what we needed. And I just want to thank you for your service all these years. And because you're on the front lines, we are always praying for you. So thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, we need the prayers. Thank you very much for asking me.
Okay, thank you. God bless.
God bless you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show today. It was a lot of pertinent and great information that I know is going to be helpful and useful to you and your family. So as the cities and states and businesses are beginning to open back up now, I'm asking that you keep a lot of this information in mind and just stay safe. You, your family members, and all of your loved ones. And I thank you again for tuning into this show, and we have more great content coming your way. So have a great day, and we'll see you next time.